Why do we love drawing characters so much? Because they're expressive. It's easy to communicate things with them and their designs, and I'm convinced that you can show just as much, if not more, of a story through a well thought out background design. Not that I pretend to be good at it, but I do have something that isn't that common for comic artists on the internet: fun when making backgrounds. But it wasn't always the case, so let me take you through my process. The background that's already finished on screen is one I drew a few weeks ago for the 3D artist I'm working with. He made me an amazing model that I'll use for my comic quite often. The background you'll see me draw today is the prolongation of this setting, the room right behind the two doors, Ellen's office. I start by placing the different furniture on the plan and then stretching it so that it matches with the perspective lines. I'm taking full advantage of the digital medium here. The first step is no joke. And I'm not the best at three-dimensional visualization, especially when it gets too cluttered, so I appreciate some help. That's why I'm really happy I could get a nice 3D model out of the previous concept art. You can notice the weird little shadow people wandering around the room in construction. They're my visual cues for the size of the furniture. Doesn't stop me from making the desk too low and the couch too large at first, but it helps. And from that, it's just pure creation. That's what I like with interior design. There's a lot less rules of anatomy to follow before having a convincing result. Just follow a few lines and you'll be fine. Speaking of lines, I'm using the Clip Studio Paint magnetic ruler to keep all my straight lines in the right perspective. It doesn't appear on the speed paint, but right now there's a bunch of purple and blue streaks across my canvas, guiding my lines automatically in the right direction. It's so efficient, really you save so much time not trying to get it right. And once you get that problem out of the way, you can focus on the subject matter, what to put inside your room. I found that asking some questions about the place helped me a lot figure things out. Like, what's happening inside? What are people doing in here? What do they need in order to do so? Is the person living inside very organized or are they messy? Are they hiding something? Do they have a habit that leaves cues behind them, like cigarettes for example? How long have they been living in here? How long have they not been living here? Ultimately, if I'm designing the room of a character, I have to know the character first, or at least the use that is made of the space. The first background is an illustration office for a newspaper, so I needed desks, pen, paper, at least one big table for the promotional posters to be created. But this room is a bit more specific in its function. It's the personal office of one character, so it has to match with her personality. Ellen has been working here since she was a teenager, and I like to imagine she got to choose the colors of the floor. You'll see at the end that every piece of wood is of a slightly different color. She's very comfortable here, so she doesn't care much about some paint stains on the ground or paper laying around. And she certainly doesn't care about using her assistant's desk as a dumping ground since she doesn't have one. That is until Morgan arrives for the vacant job, which she's not thrilled about, so she's fine with welcoming him in this mess. She's an artist working on huge pieces of paper, so she needs a big desk with small drawers for her art supplies, but also to look intimidating. When you compare the assistant's desk to hers, you quickly understand who's the boss. Morgan's also sitting on a cheaper chair, but that stays in the same style as the couch and Ellen's chair. I'm reusing the same windows as the main office, and then the funny part begins. This part. You know, I love how no engineer has to actually build this thing because I have no patience to calculate if the structure is viable or not. I'm not even sure if it's coherent, but at least it looks right. And it's all that matters. About that, it helps to look at real-life references because even if you don't need to add pillars and strong walls for it not to collapse in your fictional setting, having them makes the environment more credible, and it can be great decoration. Very specific, but I love flying buttresses, and it looks great in a huge interior. If you're lacking inspiration on what to put in your room, you can think again about the use people make of it. At first, I wanted to have naked windows because I don't want the stained glass to be covered. But then I thought about the poor soul who would need to work with the sun directly coming into their back, and I chose mercy. There isn't much heating system either, so curtains are a good addition for some isolation. Then I thought the walls looked a little empty, so I added a large shelf above the ones on the floor, and overall I tried to make the place as messy as possible. Taking inspiration from my own room, I'm a very organized person, I make to-do lists and stick to them, blah blah blah, but my room is a mess. If no one has to see it, it's mine to keep cluttered. Actually, the room isn't the worst. I clean it regularly to exercise, but my desk doesn't have this privilege, and so will be the character's room. I only kept her desk relatively clean in the actual drawing because I need it visible as a reference for later. My original idea for this room was to have a mezzanine, one open floor because I wanted an impression of busyness in the design even in the height, but I figured out it was a bit too much, so I added it to the main office. For this room, I chose to add an horizontal wooden beam to secure the structure, and so she could hang up some stuff. It breaks the huge emptiness that's created by the high ceiling. Now I'm getting on the line art and trying to figure out exactly the size of the room according to the previous concept art, and I was having a bit of a hard time, but it turned out alright. Unfortunately, architecture requires some level of geometry, but that's the kind of knowledge you learn along the way or that you already learned a long time ago but never used much, like how to find the middle of a polygon. Trust me, I'm not a math person, so if I'm doing it, it's not that hard. Creating this concept art felt more like a game of Sims than a math problem anyway. Only the characters living in it are my little shadow silhouettes. I grew attached to them, they're adorable and very helpful. You know, I understand background are long to make, especially in a webcomic, but I found that I could only draw a big shot of it at the start of the chapter, and then being a lot more loose in its depiction in the following panels. It doesn't have to be perfect every time, though you can try to when you're tired of characters. Just look how cool of an introduction to the scene a huge building can be. It depends on what kind of story you want to tell, but even if my world isn't that far from the real-life Victorian era, I like to have 1 or 2 panels just screaming at the reader, "Look at that! Isn't this world grandiose? Look at this architecture out of this world!" I wish I could visit my own town. For now, I'm stuck inside this reality. That's one of the reasons I create stories, I guess. Anyway, the good thing about having to create multiple rooms for a single building is that you mainly have to stick to the elements of the previous one. That's why you can see me draw the wall plinth the way I do. It makes the coloring process a lot faster too. I already spent all the time necessary experimenting with the color palette I wanted in the previous drawing. Then I go for the details. It's inspired by a lot of old administrative buildings you can find in Western Europe. They usually have a lot of engravings in the woods and ornaments. I love it. I kept it discreet with just a polygon in the shape of a rectangle. I add it later to Ellen's desk as well. I try to reuse a shape whenever I can because it gives some harmony to the place. Making the line art for this whole piece was really long, but so peaceful. I am already in a meditative state a lot of the times I draw, but right now I think I reached nirvana. Just letting the magnetic ruler guide my lines and refine the sketch, so satisfying. One thing I should mention, I did not do this drawing in one go. It took me multiple days of working on it for a few hours at a time, because I do get bored of object after 6 hours of it. It actually took me so long, it became a part of my routine. Whenever I was tired of working on the actual comic, I'd jump on my background concept art. Now that it's done, what am I left with? Well, no worries, I still have plenty of backgrounds to make, and characters, and props. I love concept art, and recording it. Look how fast it goes. Hours and days of my life condensed in a few minutes. Straight lines are really the easiest thing, but any curves requires a lot more brain power. I actually learned how to make a perfect ellipse in perspective last year. By hand, I mean. That shit is the most complicated thing after spiral staircases. Basically, you make a square, then more squares, then diagonals, some more diagonals. You select the right points at the intersections of the lines and you get the perfectly oriented circle. That exercise was part of my perspective exam. It was serious. We had to draw this and stairs in perspective. I'm laughing, but it was really useful. I learned some rules that I was struggling to guess for the longest time, and I nailed the exam. Okay, I have to tell you this. During one class I had with this teacher, he took the time to show us the video of someone recreating the ellipse in perspective in a YouTube tutorial, but failing miserably. And he was eager to show us how baffling this person's technique was. He even left an angry comment under the video. That's dedication, I'm telling you. Now I won't show you the video, this poor woman was humiliated enough. Imagine how many people he showed her failure to. We're 30 per class and he probably had 5 of us every week. That's 150 students to witness these messy tutorials that end with a "Oh, well, it's not supposed to look like that, but if you go on the lines again just a little harder, it may be... Yeah, it almost connects." That's why I try not to brand my videos as serious tutorials. Imagine what an angry, passionate art teacher could write to me. And he would be right, no disrespect to him. He's one of the most amazing artists I've ever met. I'm really lucky to be instructed by such talented people. That's one of the positives in art school. The teachers can be hidden gems. And at least in my school, they would be free to go over any subject they like. I learned about movie posters and the use of colors in them, for example. I love what he said about not making the sky blue in your illustrations. Basically, any other color can work and create a different atmosphere, so why not try it? But you won't see much of the sky in this piece, so it's not a great example. What I took from it is that weather can empathize the character's state of mind, and you bet that if Morgan is sad, Morgan is being rained on. Right now, you can see me indulge in the fantasy of a board filled with reminders and notes behind Ellen's desk. I even put some on the walls, like she doesn't care anymore, she has too much on her mind. It needs to be sorted out somehow, and it'll be as chaotic as required. I think her boss just gave up the idea to make her spare the walls, and he lets her stick anything she wants to it. The room's already starting to look pretty cluttered with all the papers, but it still needs more shelves. I want books everywhere, it's the easy object to fill in the gaps. I don't have much justification for it. Then I had some boards, more notes, there's some lanterns hanging up from a hook and the coat rack, and the curtains that I directly copy-pasted from a previous drawing. I used the wooden beam to hang some decoration that could reflect light in a pretty way. It's an object I've always seen at my grandparents' house. It was used by sailors as floaters in the old times. I don't think I've mentioned it yet, but the whole style of architecture and the furnitures I like are directly inspired by my surroundings growing up. Especially as a kid, I've only realized these last few years how much I care about my family's old furniture and the story behind some of the shelves we own. There's some crazy stories behind one particular desk that my great-great-grandmother brought back from India after one of her trips, and it ended up in my site, perfectly kept. I used it plenty of times as a kid without realizing the past and history of this object. Maybe my diploma in applied art I got in high school is speaking right now, but that's the kind of refined and beautiful furniture I really wanted to put inside my story. And not just to decorate, the characters are interacting with it. They're trying to open drawers, hidden doors, etc. I guess you could expect it, but I really despise brutalism and minimalism, two architectural styles that focus on the lack of ornaments. I can forgive it for the brutalist-type constructions, because the idea is to have strong buildings to quickly shelter people after or during a war, using only basic materials. But come on, minimalism is just pretentious emptiness. It's not interesting, it's not strong or reliable, it's just devoid of life, because any stain or any accident will break the aesthetic. Bring back ornaments and complicated patterns in architecture. I know we have talented artists willing to be paid for it. But anyway, I can complain all I want, the most effective way to make my wishes come true is still to make them appear in my creations. An example of useful furniture for the character I added, she uses paint, so it's nice to have a sink to wash her brushes. Also, Morgan spills paint on her at some point, so she will need to clean herself. I add some last details and then I switch to coloring. Like I said, it's pretty easy considering I've already decided on the color palette in the last drawing on the place. So the new additions lies in the detail and the new furniture. I experimented a bit with the floor. You can see I was thinking about a dark reddish brown before drawing the planks. I figured out it would lighten up the room and make her more unique. Then some missing shelves I didn't draw at the line art stage because of the camera angle, but my 3D artist still needs to know where to put them. And at last, 2 more shelves above the door because it felt a little empty. I just remembered I wanted her to be a little obsessed with time, so I drew an hourglass and a clock. So here we are with Ellen's office fully rendered. I'm so happy to have it finished, finally. It's really a big part of my daily routine that is gone. I know I'll replace it quickly, but it's hard to say goodbye. I hope you enjoyed the video. Thank you for watching.